Hey guys, I'm doing this video a little bit differently than the others that I've done because I'm using my phone, which is going to make it a little bit shakier because I'm holding my phone with one hand and going to be writing with the other. But I needed to be able to show you how to use your graphing calculator for parts of this, and I just didn't really know, since you've never used a graphing calculator before, how else to do this other than using my phone so that I could switch from this page over to the calculator and back. So if you get dizzy while you're watching this video, I apologize. We're going to have to just do the best we can. So in this one, they want you to use a graphing calculator to evaluate the function that's given up here. So the function is f of x equals 5 minus 2x. And so we're supposed to use the graphing calculator to figure out the values that would go into this table. Now, you don't have to have a graphing calculator to do that. You could just sub 0 in for the x up here and simplify that expression out, and then you would know the value of f of x. You could sub 3 in and do that, 7. But the graphing calculator has a table function that makes it a lot easier, or just a lot faster, for you to be able to get that information that you need. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how that actually works. So maybe I can do like this. We're going to kind of play with this and see. If the video is weird, I apologize. Okay, so this is a graphing calculator. It does all the same normal stuff that a regular calculator does. Add, subtract, multiply, divide. It has parenthesis options. It has x squared, or you can press second and x squared to get a square root. Just like our scientific calculators did last year. It has a caret key so you can raise things to an exponent. All that is on here. Probably the most interesting feature of a graphing calculator is the fact that it is able to graph things. That's why they call it a graphing calculator. This button that says y equals is the button that we're going to use to graph any kind of function, whether it's written as y equals or not. We can graph any function using that. So if you press the y equals button on a graphing calculator, this menu pops up. Where we see y1, that's going to be the same thing as f of x is in our actual function up here. So f of x equals can be the same thing as y1 equals. Just a way of naming the function so you know which one it's talking about. Now you can see that there's y1 through y9, and in fact if you keep scrolling down some, you can get all the way to y0, which could also be a 10th option. So you can potentially graph 10 things at one time in a graphing calculator. Now this particular problem asks us to just graph that one. So I'm going to type that in. The function is f of x equals 5 minus 2x. So I'm going to type 5 minus 2, and then the x is this button right here. So it says x and then some other symbols that we'll talk about later and you'll learn about later. But that's the one that you want to work on. Whether your equation has an x or a z or a q or whatever it has in it, that's the button you use for the variable. So 5 minus 2x. Now, that's the y equals to actually put that into it. Then we have all these other buttons. Window allows you to change the size of the screen that you see. Zoom allows you to zoom in or out on a graph that you make. The trace button draws the graph out for you, so does the graph button. They both do something a little bit different, and we'll talk about that later. And then you can see in blue, there's some other options. There's stat plot, table settings, format, calculate, and table. So for this first problem, since we're creating a table, we're going to press second and graph. That allows us to pull up table because it's written in blue back there. And then it's going to pull up this table for me. Now you see on the left side the list of x's, and on the right side the list of y1. Now if you remember, we said y1 was going to be the same thing as our f of x. So what's in the y1 list is the f of x values for each of those numbers. So when x is 0, y1 is 5. When x is 1, y1 is 3. When x is 2, y1 is 1, and so on. So if I'm going to fill in this table, I got to look at 0. So when I look at the calculator at 0, I see 5. So I'm going to put a 5 in right here. I need to look at 3. So I'm going to look at the x at 3. I'm at -1. So I'm going to fill in -1 right here. I've got to look at 7. I'm at -9. Fill in -9 right here. I have to look at 9. I'm at -13. I got to look at 12, but I only go to 10. It's easy to get to 12. You just scroll down. And I have to look at, or it's -19. And we can see that because at 12, the other side of that is -19. So that's how I fill in a table. Now, we don't have to actually do it on this one, but I'm going to show you this while we're looking at tables anyway. Right now, my table is counting by ones. and it started at 0. Let's say you had a problem that needed you to make a table, but you only had to show quantities counting by 25s. And let's say you didn't want to start until you got to 5,000. Well, it would take you a really long time to scroll all the way down to 5,000 on this graphing calculator. You could do it, but it would take forever. So there is a shortcut for that. If you press second and the window button, that brings up table settings. That's what that means, TBL set. And so what you can see is that first one is where the table will start. Mine started at 0. If you wanted it to start at 5,000, you could type that in. And then the next option is what your table counts by. So mine is currently counting by 1s. If you wanted it to count by 25, you could change it to 25. If you wanted it to count by half, you could change it to 0.5. It'll count by anything you ask it to. And so if you change those settings and you pull your table back up again, second graph, there's my table counting, starting at 5,000 and counting by 25s. So that might be useful for you on some problems later. Not necessarily on this one, but later on. And then you can go back to table settings and put it back to normal, 0 and 1, and then go back, and there it is back the way it was when we started. So I've used my graphing calculator to come up with the table values for this problem. Now the second part of this says to use it to sketch a graph. So if I go back to y equals, you can see I still have the function there, 5 minus 2x. If I want to create a graph of it, all I have to do is press graph. Oh, just kidding. What's the matter with it? Sometimes these calculators do this and I have to reset them. Give me a second, y'all. If you ever have to reset your calculator, if you'll press second and the plus key, and then go down to reset, and hit all, and say reset. Let's see if that fixes it. Now I'm going to have to put my thing back in. 5 minus 2x, graph. There we go. Okay, and so it has drawn a line representing that particular function. So they tell us to graph that on the standard view. What that means is if you're at Zoom, you're at that 6th option that says standard, and it automatically does that unless you've changed it. So when I look at this at a standard view, if we're going to draw a sketch of what we see, then I see a coordinate plane in the middle. And this is not going to be perfect, y'all, but we're going to make do. Holding my phone in one hand and my pen in the other. So I have a coordinate plane. And what I see is that line slanting downward, like that. And that's not perfect, but it'll do for what it needs to do. So now they want you to see what happens in your graphing calculator if you change the view windows. So now they want us to change the window to an x minimum of 0, an x maximum of 3, a y minimum of 0, and a y maximum of 5. So if you do that, you can change it. If you go back to Zoom, oh, I'm setting the wrong thing. Window. All right, go to window. And we're going to set our x minimum at 0, our x maximum at 3, our y minimum at 0, our y maximum at 5. You don't change anything else because they didn't tell us to change anything else. And then we'll graph that. So now I have a zoomed in portion of the graph. Notice that your x and y axis are now on the left edge, and we can only see the graph as it crosses right there. So if I'm going to sketch this, it's really hard to hold the phone straight and sketch. So there's my axis. I can even see on this calculator how many tick marks there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's up there at the 5th one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And at the bottom, 1, 2, 3. And so if I'm going to sketch that, it appears to go in a straight line from the 5th tick mark up down to about there. And that's not perfect, but it's close. So it says, what similarities and differences do you see in the graph? So similarities are, they're both decreasing. They're both linear or straight. Those are some similarities. Some differences, though, are the location of, let's put same and different. Location of the axes and the part of the graph you see. All right, that's how to use your graphing calculator to graph a function.